All right, last section for agency. About time, right? A whole week on this stuff. Misrepresentation and omission. What did we do wrong? What happened? When we don't disclose things correctly, we have either misrepresented them or we have omitted them. And I want you guys to write down these two phrases because I hope this will prove helpful for you in sorting these out, because these are test questions that tend to prove very confusing for people on the exam. Sorting out, is it a misrepresentation or an omission? I want you to ask yourself this very important question. Did they leave it out or did they make it up? Did they leave it out or did they make it up? Because an omission is not saying something that you should have said. In other words, you did what? You left it out. And the reason that's important is the O is for omission. And omission is leaving it out. You should have said something, but you did not. You left it out. That's an omission. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay, you like that?
Yes.
Or did you make it up? You answered, you said something, but the something you said was what? Wrong. It was a misrepresentation. The M is for misrepresentation. You either left it out, omission, or you made it up, misrepresentation. Does that make sense? Everybody with me on that? Now let me point out something to you. If you actually answered a question, it's not possible that you what? Left it out. If you answered the question, you either answered it correctly or you did what? You made it up. Because you speaking, there's no more possibility of omission because you actually answered. Are you with me on that? And so that's going to be the thing you have to sort through first. Here's the problem. You won't do it in the order that it has to be done because they put another word in front of it. They put willful or negligent in front of it, and you start trying to decide first if it's willful or negligent. That's the wrong order. You have to first know, is it a misrepresentation or is it an omission, and then you can come back and decide if it's willful or negligent. Is everybody following me on that? So the first thing to ask yourself when you read one of these things is, did they leave it out? In other words, did they not say something they should have said, omission, or did they make it up? They gave an incorrect statement. They just made something up. Now you can make it up intentionally or you can make it up accidentally, but you still made it up. The answer you gave was what? Wrong. That's a misrepresentation. Is everybody with me on that so far? So a misrepresentation is a misstatement. You stated something and the thing you said was wrong. An omission is you did not say anything, but you what? But you should have said something. You simply left out something that should have been said. It's not that you said something wrong. You didn't say it all. If you know the roof leaks, what should you do? You should disclose it. You should disclose it. So you have a conversation with the buyer and the roof never comes up and you never say anything at all about the roof. Is that a misrepresentation or is that an omission? That's an omission because you what? You left it out of the conversation. If the buyer says, is there any problems with the property? You say, oh no, no problems at all. Did you leave it out or did you make it up? You made it up because you knew there was a problem. Does that make sense? That's the difference between an omission and a misrepresentation. So far, so good? Let's talk about an example. Tommy's a listing broker and states to a potential buyer that one of his listings has no problems with the roofing. Later, the buyer finds out that the roof is actually leaking. Did Tommy make it up or did he leave it out? He made it up. So it's a what? Misrepresentation. Whereas an example of an omission, Samara is a provisional broker who takes her first ever listing. She tours the property with the seller, but is a bit too nervous to ask the seller about the obvious cracks in the foundation wall. A buyer who did not have a home inspection purchases the property and later finds foundation settlement issued. Did she make up anything about the foundation, or did she simply leave it out? Yeah. She left it out, so what is it? It's an omission. It's an example of an omission. We're only halfway there. We've answered the question halfway, but to be honest, we've answered the most important part of the question. That's the one that people struggle with, the misrepresentation or omission part. Is everybody okay so far? Now, we need to talk about, is it a willful act or is it a negligent act? Is it a willful act or is it a negligent act? Now I'm going to write something else up here on the board. With knowledge. Willful. If you know that what you're doing is wrong, you do it with knowledge, what does the W stand for? Willful. Willful. If you don't know what you're doing is wrong, you do it with no knowledge, what does the N stand for? Negligent. Negligent. So, I said something that was wrong, but I didn't know what I was saying was wrong. So, what's the first question you have to ask yourself? Did I leave it out or did I make it up, right? I said something that was wrong, but I didn't know it was wrong. Did I leave it out or did I make it up? I made it up because I what? I said something. Right? I made it up, so it is a what? Misrepresentation. Now the second part. Did I do it with knowledge or did I do it without knowledge? I said something that was wrong, but I didn't know it was wrong. No knowledge, so is that willful or is that negligent? Negligent. So that would be a negligent misrepresentation. That's a negligent misrepresentation. It says a willful act is done when the licensee has actual knowledge. They know that what they're doing is wrong. Whereas a negligent act is done when a licensee does not have actual knowledge. They made a mistake. Okay? So, when you start putting them all together, the broker makes an incorrect statement, plus the broker knows the statement is wrong. That is a willful misrepresentation. That make sense? Let's just play a little, actually, let's see what I have here. On this, I don't have that. All right, let's make up a story. See how well you can ask yourselves these questions, okay? Sammy is a listing broker who's listing 123 Main Street in Garner, and he's touring the property with the property's owners to get it ready for listing. As he walks through the property, Sammy notices a water stain on the ceiling in the upstairs hallway. He asks the sellers about the status of any leaks in the roof. The sellers reply to him that there is an active small leak in the roof, but they don't consider it a big deal. Sammy makes a note of this in his paperwork and continues to tour the rest of the property. Upon returning to the office, Sammy places the property in the MLS, lists it for sale, and makes no mention whatsoever of the roof or the leak. The property stays on the market for a couple of months. Sammy holds an open house, and buyers come to tour the property. Buyer Catherine walks through the property with Sammy. Buyer Catherine also notices the water stain on the ceiling, and she inquires to Sammy about the status of any leaks in the roof. Sammy responds that there are no problems with the property. This is an example of what? And your answer choices are going to be willful misrepresentation, negligent misrepresentation, willful omission, negligent omission. Is everybody okay with that? with the answer choices. So now, what is the first question I said you need to ask yourself? Did he leave it out, or did he make it up? Which is it? Oh, really?
He made it up.
He really left it out. For a while he did. What did he eventually do? He made it up. Because she said, she asked him a question and he did what? He responded. He answered that there were no problems with the property. So he what? He made it up. This is a what? Misrepresentation. Now, the question is, did he do it with knowledge or did he do it with no knowledge? Which one is it? He did it with knowledge because the sellers told him there was a leak in the property. So, is it willful or is it negligent? Willful. It's willful. This is a willful misrepresentation. Does that make sense? Now, I realize I tried to talk you into it being an omission, right? Because I said that he wrote it down in his notes, and then he went back and he put it in the MLS, and he didn't make any mention whatsoever of it. And if I had stopped right there, what would it have been? It would have been an omission, but I didn't stop right there. It continued on, and eventually that omission turned into what? A misrepresentation. See, that's what you've got to stick with it. You've got to follow the story all the way to the end and ask yourself, did he ever make it up? Because if they misrepresented, it's no longer an omission. Think of it this way. Every misrepresentation starts out as an omission, doesn't it? So you have to see, does it stay an omission or does it change to a misrepresentation at some point? Did you have your hand up, Tim?
I did. So the time that it changed to a misrepresentation was when Catherine asked. Was it Catherine?
Not when she asked, but when you what?
When he replied.
When it was you. Don't say he. It was you that did that. when you replied.
If Sammy would have said, I don't know.
If Sammy would have said, I don't know.
Yeah.
Hold on.
It's still an answer?
It's still an answer. Is the answer correct?
No.
No, he knows. So, did he leave it out or did he make it up? He made it up. Even I don't know is a misrepresentation at that point because what? He knows. So when he's asked the question, the only option he has is to answer it truthfully. And what would be the correct answer? What should he have said at that point in time? Yes, now that you mention it, the owner did mention there was a small leak in the roof. I don't know the extent of it, I don't know any more information, but according to the owner, there is a small leak in the roof. That's what the answer should have been. Does that make sense?
Now, what I'm saying, he truly just forgot about the notes and just put it in the list, and then she asked.
That's a good question. So what if I said, I'll change it up. We'll go back to same story. Okay, everybody good? Sammy walks to the house, he talks to the sellers, he asks about the stain, they respond to him, yes, we have a small leak, and we're not sure we don't think it's a big deal, we're not sure about anything else. Sammy makes a note in his paperwork, he goes back to the office, he places the property in the MLS, he forgets to say anything about it, he doesn't mention it in the listing. 2 months later, he's holding an open house. Buyer Catherine comes to the open house. She tours the property with him. She notices the water stain. She inquires to Sammy, is there a leak in the property? Having forgotten about the conversation with the sellers, Sammy responds that there are no problems with the property. This is an example of what? Go through the same process again. Did he make it up or did he leave it out? Don't try to do it all at once. Did he make it up or did he leave it out? But did he eventually, don't make it harder than it is. Did he make it up or did he leave it out? He made it up. He still said what? No, there's not a problem. And that answer is wrong, is it not? He made it up. So is it a misrepresentation or is it an omission? It's a misrepresentation. Now, the second half of the question is, Did he do it with knowledge, or did he do it with no knowledge? No, he didn't. Bullshit. Because I made a specific point of saying what? Having forgotten about the conversation with the sellers. You asked me to do it.
I got it.
Having forgotten about the conversation with the sellers. Did he have any knowledge? No. What does forgotten mean to y'all? He doesn't know. Isn't that what forgot means? I don't know. Generally speaking, when you forgot something, you don't know it, right? You don't know if you can't remember it. I don't know what kind of definition of knowing you got. What are you going to sit there on the test and go, I know this answer, but I can't remember. You going to count it right? No. You don't know. If you've forgotten, you don't have knowledge. So is it a willful misrepresentation or a negligent misrepresentation? That's a negligent misrepresentation. Does that make sense? See, you've got to pick them apart. You can't make assumptions, and you've got to read it exactly as they say it. I'll make up another one for you, okay? Teresa is a listing broker who's taking a listing for a property in Chapel Hill. She tours the property with the sellers, and as they're touring the property, the sellers make a point of informing her that there are water stains around the toilet because there have been some recurring leaks in the property. Teresa makes a note of this in her listing. She later places the property for sale in the local MLS, and she properly notes in the listing that there is a potential leak around the toilet in the master bathroom. Several weeks later, when touring the property with a potential buyer, the buyer notices water stains and inquires to Teresa about the status of the leaks. Teresa neglects to go back and reference her property notes, nor does she consult with the listing paperwork, so she informs the buyer that there are no problems with the property. This is an example of which? So did she make it up, or did she leave it out? She made it up. So it's a what? Misrepresentation. Now the question is, did she do it with knowledge or with no knowledge? I'm going to lose my screen.
Knowledge. Some plastic all over it.
With knowledge? Yeah. With knowledge. So what is that? That is a willful misrepresentation. Good. You see how you have to break it down into pieces, right? And here's the other thing. You're looking at tiny snippets of time. You're not looking at the big picture. Once you've decided it's a misrepresentation, you go to that exact moment and say, at that exact moment, did she know? Does that make sense? At that exact moment, did she have knowledge? That's the way to answer these questions. How do you feel about that?
I'm still trying to wrap my head around, did they leave it out or did they make it up? So basically what you're saying is, as long as a agent replies to anyone's inquiry about something that they, whether they know of or did not have any knowledge of, that if they reply, then it is a misrepresentation.
That's exactly right.
If they don't reply, then it is an omission.
That's exactly right.
So if it's not
The only way it's not one of those two things is if they reply with what?
with an answer?
An answer that is what? Correct. If they reply with an answer that's incorrect, it's what? It's a misrepresentation. They made it up. If they don't reply or don't respond or don't say anything, it's a what? It's an omission. So you're exactly right. You've got it filtered out exactly right. If they respond, if they reply, if they say anything that's wrong, it's a misrepresentation. Now, can I say something that's wrong and not mean to? Sure I can.
Do it all the time.
Do it all the time. I mean, you know, so give you an example of a situation like that, for example. Let's say Catherine takes a listing for a new listing in downtown Clayton. And she tours the property, making notes of all the features on the property, taking several pictures. Catherine places the property for sale in the local MLS and does not disclose any pertinent material facts about the property. She conducts an open house which generates a lot of traffic on the first weekend. Several buyers are walking through the house at the same time. One of the buyers comes back to Catherine, who's standing in the kitchen, and asks about doors that stick in the master closet. And Catherine responds that there are no problems with the home. Months later, after purchasing the home, the buyers are doing some renovation work and discover major foundation settlement issues centered under the master bedroom. This is an example of what? So ask yourself the first question. Did she leave it out or did she make it up? Which one did she do? She made it up because she told them what? There's no problems. Now the question becomes, did she do that with knowledge or no knowledge? Which one is it? No knowledge. So is that willful or negligent? Negligent. Now put them together. It's a what? That is a negligent misrepresentation. That's a negligent misrepresentation. Is that making sense? Starting to piece together a little bit better now? Same story. Show you how they change. Catherine tours the home. She makes notes of all the features. She lists the property. She doesn't make any mention of any pertinent material facts about the property. She holds an open house which generates significant interest. She has 10 buyers in the open house on Saturday. One of the buyers comes to the kitchen where she's greeting visitors and inquires about several doors that are sticking in the master closet. Catherine never hears the question as she's greeting other clients or potential buyers. The buyer goes on to make an offer on the property anyway, purchases the home, and months later finds out about major settlement issues centered under the master bedroom. This is an example of what? Did she make it up or did she leave it out? She left it out, so it's a what? It's an omission. Did she do it with knowledge or no knowledge? No knowledge, so it's negligent. So that's, put it all together, a negligent omission. A negligent omission. And here's how you know she should have known and should have said something. The buyer noticed it, didn't they? They noticed it enough to come ask her about it. Should she have noticed that the closet doors were sticking? Sure. Does that make sense for everybody? So I think if you will discipline yourself to ask this question first and ask this question second, you'll have a really good chance of sorting through those on the test. I know the temptation is to do it in the other order because the willful and negligent is the first word you come to, but you really need to decide the omission or misrepresentation part first and then ask the willful or negligent question. Yes, sir, buddy.
I've been in a class before, I think so, you know, you taught it a little bit different before. You know, first and second, all that. But before in our class, I think it was my class, it was more about whether you spoke or didn't speak.
Right.
Or
Did he say anything?
Or make it up, right?
Right.
Did he say anything? I don't know. That kind of messed me up at first, because I am like stuck on spoke or not.
Did he say anything?
Yeah.
Did he make it up?
Yeah.
Same thing.
But it took
If
10
you
seconds.
say something, right? If you say something, it's a misrepresentation. I'm trying to connect the M and the O for people, you know?
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah, and that's you know, I'm constantly trying to evolve the way I do this because people struggle with this.
Yeah.
You
I don't
know?
know if that messed anybody else up, but it messed me up.
Oh, I got a
At
question.
first, I'm like, whoa.
Sorry.
Yeah, this makes this.
Whatever way works.
Yeah.
And Sammy basically asked the same question. Sammy said, so if I answer the question, it's a misrepresentation. Well, yeah, if you answer the question wrong, it is a misrepresentation. That's the definition of a misrepresentation, right? Saying something that proves to be wrong or incorrect. So here's the magic words I always look for. Responded, replied, said. If you see that word or those words, it's not going to be an omission, it's going to be what? A misrepresentation. Because if I responded or replied or said something, clearly I either responded, replied, or said something correct, or if it's incorrect, I made it up, right? It's a misrepresentation. Everybody okay with that? Good, good. Because those are ones that consistently do throw people for a loop, so I want to make sure you're good on those. All right? As far as final wrap-up here, duties that we have not talked about. So we wrapped up disclosure. The last kind of things we need to put a tie ribbon around this is, what duties do we owe to people who are our customers, not our clients? I want to just kind of tie a ribbon around that. We've been talking about it. We've been talking about all this disclosure stuff. So if I ask you, what do I owe to customers, what should be the first thing that should pop in your mind?
Material facts.
Disclosure of material facts. That's the biggest thing that we owe to customers. What do we owe to our clients? Everything. We owe them loyalty, obedience, accounting. We owe them disclosure of all the information we know, any compromising information. We owe them all that stuff. But when it comes to customers, the only thing, we just rip all that stuff away except what? Disclosure of material facts. The last two things that we owe to a customer. We owe them honesty and we owe them fairness. Honesty and fair dealing. Not loyalty, not obedience, honesty. Don't lie. Okay? So honesty, fairness, and disclosure of material facts. That's it. That's it. All right? And that is it for Chapter 7. It's a whopper. It is. I told you. I told you it took us 10 hours to get through it. Yeah. But if you even remotely feel comfortable with it, then we have accomplished a ton the last couple of days, because this is the heart of the class. And this will dictate how well you understand almost everything else we do for the rest of the class, because almost everything else we do for the rest of the class is going to have some shade of agency on it. You know, maybe except finance stuff. The finance stuff is pretty dry, but almost the rest of everything. So for homework for this week, you don't have any math to do. Look at that. No math homework. I will email you a quiz. An agency quiz, and I'll try to make it a pretty extensive one, especially since you don't have any math homework to do and you need to engage with these questions as much as possible. So look for an email from me, I'd say probably by tomorrow evening, with a quiz, and it'll be just on Chapter 7, okay, just for Chapter 7. For next week, go ahead and prepare for Chapters 8 and 9, okay? Chapters 8 and 9, we probably, well, yeah, with you guys we will finish Chapters 8 and 9 next week. That is agency contracts and basic contract law. I would highly encourage you to watch the videos, in particular on basic contract law, because basic contract law can be a real sort of trip-up subject for a lot of people. Get your brain in the way of thinking for contracts. So that's your homework for next week, is get prepped for 8 and 9, and look at that. That means your midterm will be the following week. How about that? Because the midterm is Chapters 1 through 10. So you can anticipate taking your midterm exam home not next week, but the following week as a take-home assignment. So just know that that's coming on the horizon. All right? That sounds right to me. Sounds right to me. Have a good week, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Actual like acreage and tax bill.
Well, that's good. That's good.